Have you ever noticed how some people can walk into a room and somehow control everything without saying a word? They don't perform. They don't seek attention. They just exist. And yet everyone feels their presence. Jung called this psychological invisibility, the ability to influence without revealing intention. And those who master it become untouchable. The invisible paradox. Most people believe visibility equals power. They think the loudest voice wins, that presence means performance, that influence requires display. But they're operating from a fundamental misunderstanding of how psychological power actually works. True power isn't about being seen. It's about controlling what others see. It's about becoming a psychological mirror that reflects back what people need to see while revealing nothing about your actual intentions, motivations, or strategies. Jung discovered this through his concept of the persona, the mask we wear in social situations. But he observed something fascinating about certain individuals. While most people wear obvious personas that everyone can read, there exists a rare type who has learned to wear no persona at all. Or rather, they've learned to wear psychological invisibility itself as their persona. These individuals don't disappear. They don't become wallflowers. They don't withdraw. Instead, they master something far more sophisticated. They become psychologically neutral. Present but unreadable. Engaged but unpredictable. Influential but undetectable. Think about it. The person who's trying to be charismatic reveals their need for validation. The person who's trying to be intimidating reveals their insecurity. The person who's trying to be liked reveals their fear of rejection. But the person who reveals nothing? They become a psychological enigma. And enigmas hold power because they force others to project onto them. The psychology of projection. Here's where it gets darker. When you become psychologically invisible, you don't lose influence, you gain a different kind of influence. People begin to project onto you whatever they need you to be. And projection is the most powerful form of psychological control because the other person creates it themselves. Jung understood that humans are meaning-making machines. We can't tolerate ambiguity. When we encounter someone we can't read, our minds automatically fill in the blanks. And here's the key. We usually fill them in with our own unconscious contents. The psychologically invisible person becomes a blank screen onto which others project their fears, desires, assumptions, and needs. To the insecure person, you appear confident. To the aggressive person, you appear threatening. To the needy person, you appear self-sufficient. You become whatever they need you to be to make sense of their world. But here's the manipulation. You're not actually any of these things. You're just present, calm, observant, unreadable, and that neutrality forces them to reveal everything about themselves while you reveal nothing about yourself. This isn't deception. This is psychological aikido, using others' energy and projections to create influence without force, without performance, without revealing your hand. The art of psychological neutrality. So how do you become psychologically invisible? It starts with understanding that most people are psychologically loud. They broadcast their emotions, their needs, their intentions constantly. Happiness, anger, fear, excitement, it's all written across their faces, in their body language, in their voice tonality. But psychological invisibility requires what Jung called conscious unconsciousness. Being fully aware while appearing completely neutral. Your face becomes unreadable. Your body language becomes ambiguous. Your responses become minimal, but perfectly calibrated. You're not being fake. You're being strategically unclear. You're not lying. You're simply not volunteering information that others haven't earned the right to know. Watch how this changes social dynamics. When people can't read you, they become more invested in figuring you out. When they can't predict your reactions, they become more careful around you. When they can't manipulate your emotions, they start treating you with a different kind of respect. The psychologically invisible person doesn't need to demand respect. They command it by being impossible to categorize, predict, or control. The nobody advantage. Here's Jung's deepest insight about psychological invisibility. When you become nobody in particular, you can become anybody when necessary. The person who has no fixed psychological image can adapt to any situation, read any room, influence any outcome because they're not trapped by their own persona. Most people are prisoners of their own image. The nice guy can't be ruthless when needed. The tough guy can't show vulnerability when strategic. The successful person can't admit ignorance when learning would serve them. But the psychologically invisible person? They can access any psychological state, any social role, any emotional range because they're not committed to maintaining a specific image. They're psychologically fluid. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not becoming a fixed personality, but becoming so integrated that you can consciously choose which aspects of yourself to express in any given moment. The dark side of visibility. Let's examine what you lose when you're psychologically visible. When people can read you easily, they can predict your reactions and manipulate them, identify your emotional triggers and exploit them, categorize you and limit your potential influence, project their own limitations onto you, use your consistency against you. Every time you react predictably, you train others how to control you. Every time you reveal your motivations, you give others the roadmap to influence your decisions. Every time you display your emotions openly, you hand over the keys to your psychological kingdom. The psychologically visible person is always at a disadvantage because they're operating with their cards face up while others keep theirs hidden. But psychological invisibility reverses this dynamic completely. Now others are revealing their cards while yours remain hidden. They're showing you their triggers, their needs, their fears, their strategies, and you're collecting all of this intelligence while revealing nothing in return. The implementation. Becoming psychologically invisible isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming consciously selective about what you reveal and when. It requires 3 key skills. First, emotional opacity. Your emotions exist, but they're no longer public information. You feel everything, but you choose what others see. Anger becomes stillness. Excitement becomes calm interest. Fear becomes quiet observation. Second, response neutrality. Instead of immediate reactions, you develop what Jung called conscious pausing, a moment of choice between stimulus and response where you decide how much of yourself to reveal. Third, strategic ambiguity. You become comfortable with being misunderstood because you realize that clarity isn't always in your interest. Sometimes being mysterious serves you better than being understood. The transformation. When you master psychological invisibility, something profound shifts. You stop living reactively and start living strategically. You stop being shaped by others' projections and start shaping how others perceive reality. People begin to sense something different about you, but they can't name it. You become simultaneously more present and more mysterious, more influential and more independent, more connected and more autonomous. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in conscious tension. You can be nobody and somebody simultaneously, invisible and influential, present and protected. This is the psychology of true power, not the power that demands recognition, but the power that works in shadow, unseen but undeniable. The mirror's reflection. In the end, psychological invisibility isn't about hiding from the world. It's about reflecting the world back to itself so clearly that people see themselves instead of you. And in that reflection, they reveal everything you need to know while learning nothing about you that you haven't chosen to share. You become the mirror that shows others their truth while revealing none of your own. And that, Jung would tell you, is the most dangerous position you can occupy. Because the person who can see without being seen, influence without being detected, and remain untouchable while touching everything, that person doesn't just have power. They are power itself. The question isn't whether you're ready to become psychologically invisible. The question is, are you ready to see what happens when nobody knows who you really are, but everyone feels your presence? Remember, the weak seek to be seen. The strong choose when to be visible. But the truly dangerous, they master the art of being nobody, while controlling everything.